Hello, it's Chino here. Today I'd like to explore line in the hyper-accelerated dragon Sicilian, just to show you a typical blunder for white. So after pawn to e4, c5, introducing the Sicilian, knight to f3, g6, introducing the hyper-accelerated dragon. White can play pawn to d4, and after pawn takes d4, queen takes d4. Going back one move, it's worth noting the more common move is to play knight takes d4. But in this particular line, white goes queen takes d4. The best continuation for black here is knight to f6. And after something like pawn to e5, threatening the knight, black would play intermezzo, knight to c6, threatening the queen. And after something like queen to a4, knight to d5. And if queen to e4, the tricky move for black here is knight d to b4. Just going back one move, it's worth noting that the main continuations for black and the better continuations for black are knight to b6 and knight to c7. There is some extensive theory on these lines, but black's doing okay in those lines. Back to our key position after queen to e4. Knight d to b4 is not as good as the two tries we've just seen, but plays for a trap. Now, just before we look at the trap, I'll just quickly point out what white's best move is in this position, and that's the move bishop to b5. Now, the idea of this move is that after a move like d5, which is typical in these sorts of positions for black, to try and free the white bishop, white would meet this by queen takes b4, winning a piece because knight takes b4 is impossible. So after the key position with bishop to b5, black would usually have to be content with something like pawn to a6, when white can continue bishop times c6, knight times c6, bishop to f4, with a slightly better game for white because of the space advantage. Although with careful play, black should be able to hold the position. So back to the critical position after queen to e4 and the opening and knight d to b4. I've had a few players blunder with pawn to a3, and this move is a blunder because of the continuation pawn to d5, threatening the queen. The idea is that if pawn takes d6 en passant, bishop to f5 would win for black. For example, after queen e2, knight takes c2. Going back a couple of moves as well, c3 is the other move that's been played against me, which is met by the same move, pawn to d5, threatening the queen. And after if say pawn takes e6 en passant, bishop to f5 again, and winning some material for black. If we go back just a couple of moves, after d5, white can defend a bit better with queen to e2, but black would simply retreat the knight to a6 with a good position. The point here being that the white queen obstructs the bishop on f1, and black has quite easy development with bishop to g7, castles kingside. So to summarize, in the key position in the accelerated dragon, after queen to e4, knight d to b4, key move, white is advised to play bishop to b5 in this position. That's white's best move, because alternative moves like a3 or c3, and at this point it's probably even worth noting an even knight c3 would be met by pawn to d5, and if pawn takes e6, bishop to f5, with a winning game for black. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please don't forget to subscribe down below.